And so that's what I would do. I would go, we'd pick up these 80s. I'd come back. They would sell so fast. Say I'd pick up maybe like 40, right? And I'd say, okay, I'm going to set aside 5 or 6 for myself, and then I'd sell the rest, right? By the time it was like a 40-minute drive back home, 45-minute drive. By the time I got back home, they'd all be spoken for.
They'd
all
be a hot commodity.
Yeah, people, hey, I'll take 3, I'll take 4, save me 5. And it's like every...
And how much were you like selling them on average for?
$60.
For each pill?
For each pill, yeah.
Welcome to PEJ'S Recovery Corner. This is a recovery podcast where we talk about all things recovery. Recovery from what? Recovery from addiction, from alcoholism, from mental health. Before we get started, if you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and like and share everywhere. And please comment too. We always like to hear from people that comment. Also, if you're on other platforms, you can find us at PEJ'S Recovery Corner. And this is my good friend. His name is Jordan. Welcome to the corner.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had you on here a long time ago when it wasn't official. Yeah. But anyway, so good to have you back. We usually like to delve deep into your past and then just go through the whole process and see, how you got into what you got into and then the recovery process. So tell us, who's Jordan Erling? Where are you from? Where were you born, raised, all that?
Sure. So I was born in the great state of New Jersey. I'm going to date myself here, 1987. And had a pretty normal childhood until my parents got divorced around 6. I think I was 5 or 6 years old. So right off the bat, I kind of felt a little different than the other kids because, at least in my eyes, I felt like a lot of them had these like perfect families. And then I came from like this broken family with a separated mom and dad. And then I remember growing up, I would spend the weekends with my dad and then come back with my mom and live with my mom. My mom remarried.
This is all in Jersey?
This is all in Jersey. My mom remarried. I got a stepdad. And then I remember going and visiting my dad and my mom, and they would kind of talk smack about each other back and forth. And I was like, this can't be normal, right? But it was like the one thing that I picked up that I was like, I feel like it makes me different than everybody else. I'm not on the same level playing field as everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you have siblings too. Was everybody affected by their divorce?
Yeah, I have 2 brothers, 2 younger brothers that are identical twins, and then a younger sister that was from my mom's second marriage.
Oh, you're the oldest one?
I'm the oldest, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then who would you stay with more when you were growing up?
I grew up with my mom. I lived full time with my mom, and then my dad would come on the weekends and pick us up, and we'd spend the weekends with our dad. So.
And then growing up, were you a good student? Did you mess around? Were you a class clown?
I guess a little bit of everything.
Why am I not surprised? Knowing you.
Starting off, I was a good student. I feel like I got good grades in the beginning, and then once I got to high school, then I kind of became a little more of a class clown. I got a cool car. I was always kind of a little dorky, kind of geekish kid growing up. And then once I got into high school, I got a cool car, right? And so once I got the cool car, I kind of started hanging out with the popular kids.
Yeah.
And that's when I started smoking weed. That was the first drug I ever did, was smoking weed.
Okay.
And I remember it was so much fun. I think I was 16, right? I was 16 the first time I smoked weed. And it was before a football game. Out of the tin can, right? We crushed the can. We put the holes in it.
Yeah.
And then
there was a certain particular shape that you had to make.
You have to make into like little concave, right? And so
poked the little holes in there.
Yeah, someone have an earring to poke the holes, right? Yeah. So we smoked, and then we went to a football game, and it was a good time. They say you don't get high the first time, but I feel like I got a little high. I was a little giggly the first time,
Oh, you hit it right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I remember you had to like poke a thicker hole on the side to kind of put your finger on.
A little carb. Yeah, exactly.
A little carburetor. So then what? Did you finish high school on time?
So this is funny. The first time I ever got introduced to treatment center, I was actually still in high school, right?
Okay.
So
something about you Jersey folks. A lot of y'all went to treatment in your
us East
adolescent
Coasters.
periods.
Yeah, we're different. We're a different breed.
Yeah.
So on the East Coast, we have delayed openings, right? So like if it's snowy out, they'll delay the opening of the school by 2 hours. That way they have time to clear the roads and we can go to school. So we had a delayed opening, like a 2-hour delay. And my buddy asked me to pick him up and drive him to school. So I picked him up. And then I remembered in the back of my truck, I had like a water bottle with a little bit, I think it was vodka or whiskey. I think it was vodka, like a couple shots of vodka.
Mm.
And, you know, being the badasses that we were, I was like, hey, man, want to take a couple shots before school? He's like, yeah. So, like, I take a swig of it. He takes a swig of it. We get out of the truck. We're parking by the high school, right? He throws it into the woods.
Yeah.
And then we walk into school. And then I'm in criminal justice class of all classes, right? And I hear them call me down to the principal's office, like Jordan Erling down to the principal's office. I was like, what is this about? So we go down to the principal's office. I go down to the principal's office. And the principal takes out the water bottle that we had taken the shot from, and he throws it on his desk. And he's like, what's this? And I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Yeah, I'm in trouble. And he's like, I know you were with someone else. You have to tell me who you're with now. And I was like, I have no other option. I have to tell him who I was with, right?
Yeah.
So they called the other kid down to the principal's office, and they said, you guys are going to have to get assessed for treatment center. Otherwise, you're not going to be allowed to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they did. My mom brought me to this rehab treatment center for outpatient. They assessed me, and I unknowingly didn't know that like creatine could mask your urine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Apparently that's a thing. If you smoke weed, that if you take creatine, it can mask certain things in your urine. So like I asked the lady, I was like, hey, by the way, I'm taking creatine. And they're like, you're this liar. They started accusing me of all these things. And I was devastated. I was like, I just smoked a little weed, like I didn't know that this was going to turn into this. So
how old were you then?
17.
Yeah.
So my mom brought me to another treatment center to get an assessment. And then I ended up doing 6 weeks at the treatment center, outpatient.
While you were still going to high school?
Still in high school, 17. Yeah, they
Living
wouldn't let
at
me.
home.
They wouldn't let me graduate until I completed this program.
You had to do that.
6 weeks of outpatient program. But I always like to say it's almost like it taught me. It was like a drug school almost. It taught me
more about drugs,
tricks about how to get away with things, and we'd have two outpatient sessions. I think Monday was like with the whole family, and then Wednesdays were just the kids. Yeah. So on the Wednesdays when it was just the kids, we'd be outside talking or smoking cigarettes or whatever. And then they would tell me all these tricks of how to not get caught. And it was almost like a drug school. I learned more about drugs in rehab than I did ever in the streets,
Interesting. So you finished all that on time?
Yeah, I finished.
And you stayed sober?
I had a reservation, because I was 17 years old. I was like, I can't stop smoking weed. And I love weed. That was like my first true love. So I had a reservation, and I was literally counting down the days till I was done with treatment. And then the first day I smoked weed right back into it. And, but I was able to just smoke weed for a while. Weed wasn't really a problem for me, that it was, ruining my life. It wasn't until I got a little bit older. Now, the town that I lived in didn't have a lot going on, right? It was a farming town in northwestern New Jersey. Yeah. So I remember when these Oxycontins were going around, because people were calling it hillbilly heroin. And I remember I was just at my friend's house, completely innocent, one night, and he pulls this out, and he's like, hey, I got these Oxycontins. He's like, you want to try it? And I was like,
were these the 80s?
The 80 milligram Oxycontins, yeah. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so I saw him take the coating off this pill. He's like, oh, this is the time release. You take this off, right? And then he crushed the pill, and then we snorted it. And I remember that feeling. It was like, they always say that the heroin opiate addicts, they always chase that first time rush. And I remember feeling like, oh, it's like this warm sensation across my body. And I was like, that's the greatest feeling I've ever felt in my life. And then I chased that feeling for a long time.
So you guys snorted those?
Snorted them. Yeah.
Okay. And instantly addicted?
I'd say so. So coincidentally that year I ended up getting a pretty big tax return. So, the smart drug addict in me said, why don't we start buying them in bulk and then bringing them back and selling them? That way I can, get high for free.
How old were we during this time?
I was probably about 20, maybe 21, 22, around that age.
And so you started slinging dope?
Slinging pills. Yeah. I guess you can call it dope. It's dope made in a lab. Yeah. Exactly. So that's what I started doing. I started going down to these sketchy places like Elizabeth, Patterson, Newark, right? And I'd pick them up in bulk, and then I'd bring them back to the town that I lived in, because everyone was doing it.
Where'd you live, Morristown?
Long Valley.
Okay.
Yeah. The town that I lived in, well, so here's the dilemma, right? Is that like a lot of kids, when I graduated high school, I didn't have good grades. I was a stoner. I wasn't studying, and I got like maybe B's and C's, right? And so all the friends that I used to hang out with in high school would all go away to college. And then here the leftovers, if you will. All the people back in the town were all stoners and smoking and doing ecstasy. So I was there with the leftovers, right?
Yeah.
And so my whole group of acquaintances, they all wanted to get high on these OxyContin 80s, right? And so that's what I would do. I would go, we'd pick up these 80s. I'd come back. They would sell so fast. Say I'd pick up maybe like 40, right? And I'd say, okay, I'm going to set aside 5 or 6 for myself, and then I'd sell the rest, right? By the time it was like a 40-minute drive back home, 45-minute drive. By the time I got back home, they'd all be spoken for.
They'd
all
be a hot commodity.
Yeah, people, hey, I'll take 3, I'll take 4, save me 5. And it's like every...
And how much were you like selling them on average for?
$60.
For each pill?
For each pill, yeah.
You got to be kidding me.
Yeah. We'd get them for a bulk price of maybe like 35 or 40. So, you'd have to spend a decent amount to get a bulk, a set of 40 or 50 pills. And then you'd come back and
these were from
$60.
a doctor or from a black market or what?
Black market, yeah. Some guy that we knew in Elizabeth.
But they were getting actual prescribed pills.
I think the way it worked is he knew someone that had a script, or maybe he multiple people who had a script. Yeah. And what's crazy is, recently I've watched documentaries on this, and it's pretty fascinating. But apparently they were handing these prescriptions out like candy.
They were. I mean, out here on the West Coast, I think it was probably around the same time that you were getting into them.
Yeah.
I wasn't even sober yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
And we were doing the same. We had dirty doctors.
Oh, yeah.
We could go tell a doctor, sit in some kind of session, consultation. They would ask you some questions. Oh, my back hurts. Oh, this, oh, that. And the next thing you know, here, I'll just write you a script.
Yeah, so easy. I mean, anyone
And
can
nothing
go.
was really linked up back then. It was like you can go to lots of different doctors' offices and get a ton of scripts.
There was no kind of database that they could check, hey, is this person getting prescriptions somewhere else?
Yeah.
And I think Florida got affected the worst. There were the pill mills down there where, that's why if you ever watch documentaries on it, it's very fascinating because if you look at old footage, you just see lines of people around the building. And this is at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. These addicts all lined up around the building, just waiting to get their scripts filled.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's straight opiate addiction. So, okay, so you got into the game of slinging them, using them, and then what?
Well, as we all know, eventually you get high on your own supply,
yes.
right? So eventually your temptation kicks in and you're doing more than you're selling.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened, right? Yeah. So eventually the addiction became too powerful and I started doing too many, and then eventually you just run out of money, right? So that's what I started doing. I started doing some sketchy things for money.
Like what?
Like steal scrap metal and then go to the scrap yard. I was a regular at the scrap yard,
Make some extra money.
Yeah, I was working for my dad's company at the time, which was a window like installation company. And so, I'd be driving into the city and sometimes they would just throw out the old windows or the iron weights. So I would just take them to the scrap yard for extra money. They started calling me Scrappy around the job site. Right. Probably like 120, 130 pounds soaking wet. Right. But eventually, the pills become too expensive, right? And I think at one point during my addiction, they tried reformulating them so that you can't abuse them anymore.
Yeah.
So then...
Was that when the Roxys
came out? The Roxys became popular after that, and they were $30, right? For a 30 milligram pill. And we were buying those, but eventually that becomes too expensive, right? And I don't know if you know this, but New Jersey is like one of the largest heroin capitals of the country.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it all comes in through the port there.
I've had countless friends that were heroin addicts straight out of Jersey, including my girlfriend.
So at first, I was afraid to go to the hood, right? Because look at me, this was before I really had tattoos, right? So I was just a skinny white boy, right? So I was afraid to go to places like Newark or Patterson, unless I had some kind of connection. So what I would do is I would pay someone else a premium, usually like a $20 premium, to go pick them up, and then I would wait in the nicer parts of New Jersey, like Morristown, like you said, or Montvale. And my buddy would go pick it up, and then he'd meet me. And man, I can't tell you how many countless hours I would just sit there in the truck, right, listening to music, just waiting for my fix, right? But as this story continues, right, that becomes too expensive, and I can't afford the premium anymore. So eventually, I start going. Patterson was the place I would go to all the time.
Yeah, Patterson
was the place that. And I don't know if it's still like this because I've been gone for 10 years, but open air drug market, right? You can just drive down some of these streets in Patterson, and you just pull up on the sidewalk. They're all hanging out on the sidewalk. He says, "Well, hey, what you need?" I say,
everything.
A bundle, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes,
everything
all right,
available.
Go around the block. So then you just go around the block. You come back around. You have the money ready. He's got it for you. You take it, you're gone, right? So I was going to Patterson, right? And then I was, during work sometimes I would be making a stop in Patterson to pick up. And then, I got my dad calling me saying, where are you? Well, the guys on the job are waiting for the material. Why are you 40 minutes late, right? And, traffic, I'm stuck in traffic. Us drug addicts are so good at making excuses, right? So
this is your early 20s, right?
Yeah, I'm still in my 20s at this point, and making excuses, traffic, this and that. I guess the downfall of it all was I was dating this girl at the time, and she took some of the money that she had from work, and we figured out if she could take some of the money from her work, like right around our payday, we could like borrow the money. And then once we would get paid the next day, we would just replace it so nobody would notice, right? So that's what we would do. If it was like a Wednesday or Thursday around payday, we'd borrow some of the money from that she had, and then we'd go down, we'd pick up, then we'd come back. So it's funny because I used to pay the premium
and then pay her back when?
The next day, right? So the unpaid day. So then she would replace the money that we took, right? So we were unauthorized borrowing money. I guess stealing, borrowing, I don't know, however you want to label it, but it was, not right for us to do that, obviously.
Yeah.
And we got caught. So we go down to Patterson one time, we go pick up, and then the first thing we do is we got to get our fix in. So we pull over outside of Patterson. There's a town called Totowa, which is like a pretty nice town, but they hate all of the drama that goes on in Patterson, like all of the drugs and stolen cars and whatnot. So they've got a pretty vigilant police department. And I pulled into this parking lot, and I can't tell you how many times I've pulled into this parking lot to do the same thing. Yeah. Pulled in this parking lot. We take out the drugs. We start doing it. And across the parking lot, it's an undercover cop. And he's just sitting in his car watching. Oh, boy. And so maybe 30 seconds goes by. He whoops up in front of us, all blacked out police car, opens the door, pulls me out immediately, throws us both in cuffs, right? We immediately get arrested. Takes us to jail, which is another thing that was kind of funny is that there's a restaurant in this plaza, and my dad would go to this restaurant all the time. And I looked across the parking lot, and I saw my dad going to the restaurant.
No way.
And he didn't even notice that I was there, which is kind of crazy. But I was like, what are the chances that I'm getting arrested for drugs? And I look over and I see
Pops
my dad.
is right there.
Yeah, going to eat, right? So they bring me to jail. They rack up all these charges. All of the drugs happened to be on my side of the vehicle. And then, I had this weed, this heroin. They make my bail $35,000 with no 10% option. They try to hit me with like drugs in a school zone, all this crazy stuff. And then they're threatening to send me to Passaic County Jail. So Passaic County Jail is in Patterson, and it's one of the last places you want to be. The jail, I think, was built in the late 1800s. So it's a very old jail, and it's overcrowded. You got maybe like 4 to 5 people in one cell. Right? Wow. And so, he's making all these threats that if I don't tell him this, they're gonna love me down at the jail, and I'm freaking out, right? Thankfully, my mom, who has always bailed me out, comes out and takes care of me, bails me out. I ended up going to court, and the court, my dad, I guess, knew the prosecutor. He was connected. Us Jersey guys, right? He was connected. He knew the prosecutor. They ended up reducing the charges to what's called wandering in a known drug area. So it was a misdemeanor of just being active in a known drug area. And this was the first time, I think I was about 27 at this point. This is the first time where I'm like, I have a problem. At this point I was stealing from my mom. I stole jewelry from my mom. My dad was like renovating his house. I would go and steal the wire so that I could go scrap it. Scrapping was my get down. I would love scrapping. I'd go to random construction sites on the side of the road and then find just like random metal plates or stuff that I had no idea if someone actually wanted or not. And then I'd bring it to the scrapyard the next day and just make enough to get by. And so eventually I knew this is a problem. And I knew that I thought New Jersey was my problem. So that was like, I have to go somewhere else.
Geographic.
And, geographic relocation.
So where'd you go? So
my mom and dad were like, where do you want to go? You need to go to treatment center, get yourself right. And I thought, what are the 2 places that are nicer than New Jersey? I'm tired of the cold. So I know Florida is very big for recovery, and then California is very big for recovery, right? So I decided California because, I've been to Florida, but I'm not really a fan of humidity. So let me come out here to California. So I flew out to California, San Diego, Encinitas, and then I go to this I don't want to call it a treatment center. It was more of a sober living. And I don't know if that's when sober livings first started becoming popular, because it was a wild concept.
What year was it?
2014.
It was sober livings, but okay, go on.
I guess we call them halfway houses, right?
The halfway house is what, or Oxford House is like across America. Sober living is like a halfway house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a place where it's a sober living environment.
Now, are halfway houses mostly people that are like mandated by a judge to go there?
Depends,
Is there any kind of difference between the two?
Yeah, there's a lot of Oxford houses and halfway houses across America are court ordered homes.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of people overseeing. There's like not management or structure or things like that in a lot of the Oxford houses that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
You're just required to stay sober, and no one's really like, there's no
Accountability.
yeah, no accountability, no authority to tell you like you need to go to this many meetings a week, and we wanted. They probably test here and there, but nothing like some of the more structured sober livings that I see or that I'm involved with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the place you went to in San Diego was more structured, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the guy, his name is escaping me at the moment, but he was a recording artist in Mexico, I think, and he was like, apparently he had like a hit or a hit album in Mexico or something.
Yeah.
And he ended up opening this house because he wanted to give back to alcoholics and addicts. So I remember, actually, this is funny. I remember flying out to San Diego, and then of course it was like more of a last minute ticket because we weren't planning this. I flew out to San Diego. The guy from the sober living was there to pick me up. So I pick up my bag at the carousel, and as I'm walking out the airport, these two men wearing like flannel shirts come up to me and they say, "Excuse me, is your name Jordan Erling?" I said, "Yes, but I'm in California. Nobody knows me here." And they go, "Airport police," and they take out their badges from underneath their shirt. And I'm like, "What is this about?" And they're like, "Well, you do have a questionable rep sheet, if you will, and you had a last minute flight that was an expensive ticket. We just wanted to make sure you weren't importing drugs across the country." And I'm like, "No, I'm here for sober living. Here's the guy from the sober living," right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've never been approached by undercover airport police. And they're like, "Okay, yeah, no problem. You're good to go." So
interesting.
yeah, which was crazy, right? That gives you an idea of the kind of stuff I was up to, right?
Yeah.
So I go to the sober living, and it was really very structured, right? They said, these are the rules. It was a very nice house. First off, Encinitas, beautiful.
Yeah.
Very nice house. They gave me this whole list of rules. They almost had you like sign this contract, and they're like, "This is what you need to follow. This is the codes of conduct." Every morning we're going to go to a 7 a.m. AA meeting. They're like, "You have 2 weeks to get a sponsor. You have 2 to 3 weeks to get a job," or it might have been 4 weeks, but they were on you. Like, you really had to get on it.
Those
would wake
things
up.
you had to do. Yeah.
We would wake up at 6 a.m. every morning. We'd have a 6:15 devotional where we would all sit down and read something from maybe like as Bill sees it. We'd do a devotional, and then we'd all go to this meeting at 7 a.m. And I remember it was my first time to an AA meeting. I had gone to NA meetings before back in New Jersey, but honestly, it just gave me more connections. I wasn't ready to stop, right? So I remember coming to this AA meeting at 7 a.m. And I remember like everyone's so happy. And I was like, 7 a.m. in the morning. I'm barely awake. Why is everyone so happy here? And then it was at a place called the Belly Up, which is in Solana Beach, which is a bar. And I remember being like, "Are all AA meetings at bars?" I was like, "This is funny," because like we're all talking about recovery, and then across the room there's a huge bar with all this liquor, right? So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I remember the happiness in the room. It's almost like you feel a vibe, a spirit, if you will, the happiness in the room. And everyone looked like they were so happy. And I was like, whatever these people are on, they're loving life, right? And I got a sponsor. It was a military guy who was in the Marines, which is what I needed because I needed some kind of structure, right? So got a sponsor, started working the steps. Then they said after a week or so, they're like, "All right, you have to do," I think it was 5 job applications a day. So like, do 5 job applications a day, you'll get a job. So I started going all over the place trying to fill out job applications. I started I got hired at Walgreens. I scored well on their aptitude test. They hired me as a shift manager. So now within 2 or 3 weeks, I've got a job. I'm working full time. I've got a sponsor. I'm going to meetings. And something that's kind of funny is that, they made me a shift manager at Walgreens. So like I had access to the pharmacy, and I was like, man, these people knew that I was 3 weeks sober after slanging pills. I don't know. They might think twice about giving me access to the pharmacy, but thankfully, nothing bad ever happened there. So I was thankful for that get well job.
So let me get this straight. When you were back home before you came out to California, you were using what drugs? Was it heroin?
Yeah, so I started with pills and then went to heroin, right?
Okay.
Cocaine if I could get
Are
it.
you shooting heroin or smoking it or both?
At first, I was snorting it. So the heroin on the East Coast tends to be more powder, right? So I was snorting it, and then I would always tell myself I'll never shoot it, right? I met a guy at an NA meeting, and we went down to Patterson together one day, and I was too scared to shoot up myself. And so the first time I shot up, I was driving in a car down Route 80, and I said, you know what, man, I can't watch you, just do it for me. And he's like, all right. And he injected it into my arm as I'm driving down Route 80. And remember earlier how I told you I had that feeling the first time I snorted an Oxycontin of
Yes.
that warm? I got that feeling again, right? Because it was the first time I had ever injected drugs. And I was like, whoa, this feels awesome. And I was like, now I know why people do this. 'Cause
Right.
It feels amazing.
Yes.
You know? So that was the first time I shot up. And then thankfully I didn't shoot up for too long. It might have been maybe like 3 or 4 months before I decided to come out here for treatment, right?
So fast forward, you come out here, you're in that sober living. How long did you stay in sober living?
90 days. So
And stayed sober all the way through?
stayed sober all the way through. Had a scare. One time I went down with this guy to Tijuana, for those that don't know.
While you lived in sober
While I
living?
lived in a sober living, and we had nothing to do, right? And he offered me drugs while I was down there. He's like, look how easy it is. He's like, we'll come meet my boy Pablo, and you know, he'll give you a taco afterwards. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, you guys get drug dealers with tacos, you know? What this, you guys got a different setup over here.
Yes.
And that's what we did. Or I think we went to the strip club down there, Hong Kong. And then afterwards we went to this club, and he ended up doing drugs. He offered me something. I was like, no.
This guy was a member of the house?
Yeah, another member of the house. And I was like, no. Well, because in my head, I'm thinking, this guy's from California. He lived Cardiff by the Sea, which is the next town over, right?
Yeah.
I was like, if I get caught doing drugs, I'm out on the street. You know, I live across the country. I can't afford to just be homeless out here, right? Or go back home. So
Yeah.
I told him no. We ended up driving back to the house, and they ended up, I guess, finding out that we went to Tijuana.
Yeah.
And they're like, we got to drug test you. We got to drug test you. And they were suspecting me of getting high. I don't know if he fessed up or he got tested and then they tested me. I finally peed for them and I was clean, right? And so they ended up kicking out that other guy. But it was like the first time I had said no in my life to drugs.
Yeah.
And I might have been like 50 days, 60 days sober, something like that. So I was really proud of myself for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got another roommate at the house, and I don't know. Sometimes when you're in early sobriety, you tend to romanticize the use of drugs, and that's what we would do. We would talk about like smoking weed and how we miss smoking weed.
Yeah.
And then I started getting this idea in my head where I'm like, well, California it's kind of legal, right? You know, it's not a drug and it's not illegal, and
Cali sober.
exactly.
That's where your brain was going.
100%, right? Because I was like, well, weed. You know, you start justifying in your mind, weed was never a problem.
It's a plant.
Yeah, exactly. It's from God.
Comes from the ground.
Yeah. So again, with the reservation, which is kind of funny because if I look at it, this pattern in my life tends to repeat itself, right? Because like I did it when I was in high school, I had a reservation. Now I'm in treatment for 90 days, and you couldn't convince me I didn't have this thing, you know, kicked. I was like, oh, I'm good. I could smoke a little weed here and there. And so the day I moved out, I got a place with one of my roommates at the sober living, and smoked weed right away that first day.
And if I'm not mistaken, after a while, you know, by living a certain lifestyle that wasn't sober, you ended up not just you were homeless for a little bit, right?
Yeah. So I lived with him for a while, and then eventually the weed just doesn't do it for you anymore. So I smoked weed for about a month, right? And then I got introduced to black tar heroin, which is out here on the West Coast.
Much different.
And totally different. And it was almost like my curiosity is like, well, I've never tried that before, right? And thinking like that's going to be different, right?
Yeah.
So I got into this black tar heroin, smoking it off of the foil, which was a new experience for me, and then kind of got into meth a little bit. Tried that a few times, and I was working at the time for a solar company installing solar panels on rooftops. So I was working all day. That was a rough job. Sometimes we do 2 jobs in a day. We'd start at like 7 in the morning and end at 8 p.m. You know, so I did that for a while, and then eventually I got evicted. Right. I'll never forget my mom and brother showed up because they knew something was wrong. They showed up to California at my doorstep and tried to get me help. And me being an idiot, just ignored them and said that I'm fine. And, you know, I can't imagine how helpless she must have been, seeing me in that kind of state and in the denying that everything's fine, and then having to leave me in this state of a mind or state of being. It's a terrible state to be in. So I got evicted. And then I took a leave of absence from my work because I had a dog I had to take care of. So I was like, I need to figure out what I'm doing, thinking that it's only going to be a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a little bit of money in the bank account because I was working. So, I ended up booking a hotel. It was a Marriott down in La Jolla. And it was nice, man. It was nice. I'd open up that door, have the breeze coming in from the water. And I was like, you know what? Who needs that apartment? I could live in hotels. I was like, this is nice. And we all know that didn't last long, right? So eventually, I'm staying at these shady Motel 6s, Super 8s. There's one in San Diego. Shout out if you've ever been to the Heritage Inn off of Route 8. Everyone knows that one in La Mesa. That was super sketchy, that place.
Right.
And that's even if I could afford to live there, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time I'd be staying in my car, right? So I'd be living in my car, staying in motels. And the manipulation, I would call my mom for money. I'd call my brothers. Sometimes I'd call friends I haven't talked to in years and ask them for money, right? And somehow, sometimes it would take hours. Somehow I'd always convince them to give me money or pay for a hotel room for me, right? Because I would just not want to sleep on the street. So sometimes they'd get me a hotel room for a night or two.
Right.
And I did that over and over and over again. Eventually I meet this girl, right? I'm down at this hotel near downtown San Diego, and I come out of my room. It's like, 2:00 in the afternoon, and I see a really pretty girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, California looking girl. And she comes over, she asks me for a cigarette. And then she asked me if I do drugs. And I was like, no, I don't do drugs. I just met you 30 seconds ago, right? And she's like, shut up, you do drugs every day. And I'm like, how do you know? And I guess you could say it was love at first sight, right? Junkie meets tweaker, right?
Yeah.
East versus West. So we go into my room, we get high. She's got another girlfriend in her room. They come into my room, we smoke, we're laughing, we're having a good time. Meth was her thing, right? And heroin was mine. But obviously we both like to dabble in both. So,
yes.
Eventually, like I wasn't really hardcore into the meth at that point. So I would smoke some and then I would get really tired and then I would just pass out. So that's what happened. I passed out. Then the next day I wake up, my hotel door is open, like it's ajar, and then my laptop's gone. And I'm like, did I get robbed? Why is the door open? What happened? So it turns out she took my laptop. I don't know what else she took, but she took my laptop, which
She jacked you.
was kind of sentimental to me because my mom bought it for me, right? So it kind of hurt a little bit that she took it from me. And the crazy part is that when I hit her up, she's like, "Oh no, I didn't take your laptop. What do you mean the door was open?" Yeah, she helped me look for it.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we'll find it.
Yeah.
And then like maybe a day after that, she showed up with like a huge sack of meth, right? Which was probably my laptop if I'm thinking back to it. I should put two and two together, but.
So then you ended up going to treatment a bunch of times. How many times?
Yeah, so scattered throughout my story, I ended up trying to go to detox and treatment multiple times. I went back in Jersey a few times, and then out here in California was the majority of them. I think in total 17, 18 times.
That's a lot of times. That's a lot of treatment hopping.
Treatment, well, yeah, if you include detoxes and treatment, like 17, 18 times. And I went to places all over California, mostly in Orange County and Los Angeles. But for whatever reason, I was never ready. I was never serious about my recovery, which is funny because I had gotten a taste of the good life, right? And I think maybe that taste is what helped me get sober eventually, which is why I'm still sober now, almost coming up on 6 years.
Yeah.
Is because I got a taste of what the sober life was like, and I remember how good it was. And then once I went back to using, it was miserable, right? Like, we tend to romanticize it sometimes, but if you look back at it, that life was miserable. It was terrible.
Yeah, totally. It's all facade when you think it's good.
So I would check myself out of these treatment centers just because I was so ready to go. I can't tell you how many treatment centers I ended up checking myself out of because I wasn't ready, or the chip and dip, right? I'd get like 5-10 days, and I'm like, I'm good to go. I'm ready. Let me check myself out. which is crazy because I don't know how my insurance companies, I must have had good insurance. My insurance company kept approving me if I kept leaving these places, right?
Probably.
The pinnacle of this, if you will, or the high low point, I should say,
Yeah.
is I ended up one night. So let me back up a little bit. I was hanging out with this guy and he ended up stealing this car, this Mazda, and then he picked me up in it, right? And then we picked up this other girl. And then, he went up into the store and she was like, this guy's really annoying. We should take this car from him. And I was like, okay, And so this guy ends up going into the store. He stupidly leaves the keys in the car, and then we take off. So we bounce. So I had that car for a couple weeks. And then like a couple weeks later, this girl that I ended up meeting at the hotel, she's like, hey, can I borrow that car? She's like, I have to go see this guy. He owes me money, this and that. She's like, I'll be right back to pick you up. This girl was not very nice, right? So that's what happened. She said she was going to meet this guy. She left, and then she never came back. So I called my mom. It's in, where was I? Scripps Ranch, I think, near Poway, Scripps Ranch, San Diego, outside this grocery store. And I don't remember what time of year it was, but it gets cold at night here sometimes, right? It'll get like 40, 50 degrees. And so I'm out there and just, I think pants and a t-shirt, right? Freezing my butt off. And what do we do when we run out of options? We call our mommy, right?
Yeah,
so that's what I did. I called my mom and she said, I'll send you to a treatment center, but it's going to be far away from San Diego, because she knew that I was going to check myself out.
Yeah.
So she sends me to Northridge, which is up here in LA County. And it was the first time going to, it was weird because it was mostly like people that were there for other things other than addiction. People were there for like, eating disorders or different like mental things. And then I was there for addiction.
Right.
And I was there for 3 days, and I knew the treatment center was coming to get me at the end of 3 days. So I was like, I don't want to go to treatment. So checked myself out again, right? AMA. And now I'm walking down the street in Northridge with all of my worldly possessions on me. I think I had like a book bag and like a Target bag with everything that I own in it. And I make the decision, I'm going to steal a car. And so I'm walking down the street, broad daylight, mind you. It's maybe like 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, down the main road in Northridge. And I'm looking for a car to steal. And I walk past the car wash and I was like, wait, all these cars have keys in them. Maybe I could just hop in one of these and pretend it's mine.
Wow.
But I decided there was too many cameras. So I didn't do that. I kept walking a little bit further. And then I saw some guy get out of a minivan and walk over to his car, but he left the door open. And I somehow guessed that it was running. And so I just pounced on the opportunity, ran up behind this van, hopped in the van real quick, put it in gear and took off, said something sarcastic out the window, like, sorry, and then drove right back down to San Diego, right? So what I would do is it was a Grand Caravan, 2014 Grand Caravan, had the stow and go. I was like, I could put my drugs down there, and I would just find another Grand Caravan, and I would take the front license plate off of that and put it on the back of this van, so that if the cops got behind me, it would still come up as a Grand Caravan, right? And they wouldn't know that it was stolen. So I had that car for about 2 weeks, right? And then my girlfriend at the time, if you could say girlfriend, the woman I was associating with, right, said, "Hey, come pick me up. I got some stuff. We can get high. We can go to casino, right?" Tweakers and drug addicts love the casino, right? Don't get me wrong, I still love the casino now, but it's where a lot of, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning, you see some sketchy people, right? So I was like, yeah, let's go to a casino. So I pick her up, right? And I have $22 on me. Like, how long am I going to be in the casino with $22, right? Like, I'm going to hit a big jackpot with $22, right?
Yeah.
She was banned from one of the casinos, I think, Sequan. And then there was another casino, Hollywood's casino. And she's like, hey, I have a headache. Can you get me some medicine? I was like, I don't have money to buy you medicine, but I'll steal you some, right? So we pull up to Target off Hamishaw Boulevard, and this is Spring Valley, which people in the area call Tweaker Valley, right?
Yeah.
And we end up getting in this huge fight in the middle of the parking lot, right? She starts screaming at me, making a huge scene. She hits me, and she gets out of the car and starts storming across the parking lot. And so I'm not the kind of guy that's going to leave you stranded in the middle of a parking lot. So I drive over, I try to smooth things over, and it's not going well. She's still screaming at me, freaking out, and she crosses the main road. So I go to try to find her again. I'm trying to smooth things over. And then once I drive over to her, she's on the phone with the cops. And she's giving them my car description, which she knows is stolen. So it's kind of messed up, right?
Right.
And so I decide, oh, I'm out of here now, right? So I take off. And we had discussed going to this Hollywood casino, right? And I was like, well, she's probably telling the cops I'm going there. So I'm going to go to Saquon because she's banned from there. So I pull up to Saquon. I stopped a couple miles before the casino so I can get high. And then I pull up to Saquon. And then there's 2 San Diego sheriffs just parked at the front of the casino. And I'm like freaking out. I'm like, act natural. I'm just a soccer dad, driving by in the minivan. So I pull into a parking space. I didn't want to go in the parking garage because I feel like I would have been trapped in there. So I pull into a parking space and I'm tweaking my mind out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, let me hide for a little bit in this van. So that way the heat will die down and the cops will go and then I'll go in the casino. So that's what I did. I went in the back of the van and I'm like hiding out below the window line so they can't see me. And after about like 15 or 20 minutes, I was like, you know what? I think it's clear to come out. So I press the little key in the button so that the door slides open. I roll out of the van and I turn around and look over and there's just a police officer standing there with his arms crossed. And he's like, sir, can I speak to you for a second? And I'm like, damn it. I was like, how long was this guy there? Just watching me, hiding out in the back of this van. So
Did you go to jail?
Yeah, they ended up finding out that the van was stolen, right? It was on an Indian reservation. So the Indian reservation police showed up and the San Diego sheriff. And I don't know how that works. I was like, am I going to Indian jail or, I don't know how that works. But they ended up taking me to jail, downtown San Diego. And that was probably like one of the lowest points in my addiction where I knew something was messed up, right? That happened on February 13th, right? And I remember coming out of that situation. Somehow I convinced my mom to bail me out. She bailed me out. And I bailed out the next day and I called my ex and I was like, happy Valentine's Day. But thankfully, I've been blessed in so many different ways. They didn't end up prosecuting. They didn't end up picking up the charges. I think because she was so well known in the police community and they either knew that she wasn't going to show up or the information was unreliable. But she told them that I hit her and that I held her captive against her will. And so they charged me with false imprisonment, which is like a kidnapping charge.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, domestic, possession of a known stolen vehicle, possession of known stolen items, all kinds of crazy charges. And I'm just so lucky that they didn't end up prosecuting that case because if so, I'd probably be in a lot bigger trouble.
For sure. So I know that you had a few more rehab stints. I know I met you. You came, you got sober, then you disappeared for a minute, but then you came back, and then that time you took it serious. Now, with all the times that you've gone to treatment and that time that you took it serious, I want you to just real quick, because we're going to wrap up after that, but touch on the fact that you got sober and were holding on to a sobriety date, but then it was a secret because I guess you had a slip, and why you got honest with yourself.
Sure. I love talking about this, especially at meetings, because I feel like if anyone else can relate to it, maybe it'll help somebody else out.
Sure.
So I saw you speak at a meeting, and I found your story very powerful, and that's how, I got connected with you and we started working steps, and my life was really good. I got a year sober, right? I started doing the work. I was in sober living. I was managing a sober living at that point. And then, I ended up going back home to New Jersey for a cousin's wedding, and couldn't fight the temptation to do a little cocaine. So I did some cocaine, a lot of cocaine, I should say. And I felt really bad and felt really guilty about it. Right. And so I came back here to California, and at the time I was assistant manager of a sober living. So I was like, I can't come clean. I'm going to lose my position here, and I'm going to lose my house, and everyone's going to judge me. Right. So for years, I just kept that same sobriety date, right? And I justified it in my head of saying, oh, well, technically I'm still sober in California, and, that was the East Coast, this is the West Coast, and I kept that sobriety date for probably 4 or 5 more years, something like that, 4 years, I think. And then I got back into the steps last year, and I don't know, man, there was something inside of me, and it's funny because you think you think to yourself like, oh, these people notice, or maybe somebody knows, but it's really just you and it's your heart, right? And
Your instinct.
I said to myself, this is either going to go one of two ways. Either I'm going to hold on to this as a reason to use again, right? And I'm going to go out, or I can come clean about it. And you know, I don't know why I had built it up in his head like it was going to, my head like it was going to be this terrible thing. It wasn't, you know. And
It would have been 7 years?
yeah, my original sobriety date was October 2nd, 2017.
Okay.
So this would have been 7 years in October.
But now it's
6 years. Yeah. My new sobriety date is October 14th, 2018. So coming up on 6 years.
awesome.
And I remember doing this big book study, and something spoke to me in my heart where I was like, you have to come clean about this, right?
And you did.
And I did. And I remember this load off of my chest, off of my shoulders, where I just felt like, wow, this is amazing. I feel so much better now. I'm no longer, you know, carrying this burden of knowing that I'm lying to people. And the best part is, you know, nobody cared.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cared.
Only
right?
we care ourselves the most.
Yeah.
And now you have solid sobriety. You help a lot of people, and you're very comfortable in your skin. I know this about you. Would you be so kind as to, if anybody's struggling out there with addiction, meth, heroin, all the stuff you've done, and they just don't see any hope in the world, can you put some good energy out there before we close it out?
Yeah, of course. Listen, if I could do it, anyone can do it, right? I lived a pretty crazy life, and I was able to pull out of that, and now I'm a functioning member of society. So if you need help, there is the help out there. You know, you just got to get out of your own way, and it's worth it. Your life is worth it, and there's a much better, bigger life for you out there. So
thanks, Jordan. Thanks for coming on PEJ'S Recovery Corner. This is yet another episode of PEJ'S Recovery Corner. It's a recovery podcast. Remember to subscribe and like, and even make comments in the comment section on YouTube. And we can be found on all other platforms. My name is PEJ. Until we meet again, love you all.
Thanks, guys.